Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something really fascinating, one of the most surprising and, well, frankly, riotous festivals you might ever encounter, Purim.
Hmm.
Forget the sort of quiet solemnity you might associate with ancient religious traditions. Here, we're talking about masquerades, wild parties, and a genuine, almost mandated call for getting drunk. It really stands out among Jewish holidays for its, sheer permissiveness and joyful, sometimes a bit chaotic celebration.
It absolutely does. It's quite unique in that regard.
And to guide us through this landscape, we'll be looking at Richard Preschel's work, Purim, Origins, Evolution, and Enduring Significance, and also the various academic sources he draws on. Our mission for this deep dive is to really get under the skin of how this seemingly, well, almost anachronistic festival, steeped in ancient history, and this remarkable mix of cultures managed to earn such a unique and lasting place in Jewish tradition.
Exactly. Our goal is to peel back the layers of Purim. We'll start with its surprising celestial roots, explore some unexpected connections to other ancient cultures, then we'll dive into the pretty complex academic theories that have tried to explain how it developed. And finally, we'll look at why this particular festival seems to have such a remarkable resilience within Jewish tradition. So much so, actually, that some rabbinic sages even believed it would be one of the few to carry on into Messianic times.
It sounds like a wild ride, honestly. I mean, how could a festival celebrated with such, well, abandon possibly be tied to the precise movements of the stars and planets? And did its main figures, Queen Esther and Mordecai, actually echo ancient gods from, Babylon or Persia? And why, out of all the rich Jewish holidays, is Purim considered one of the very few that the sages thought would last forever? Let's try and unpack all of that.
Let's do it.
So to really get a handle on Purim's unique character, I think we first need to understand the ancient world it came from. A world where festivals weren't just, dates circled on a calendar. They were deeply connected to agriculture, to the natural world.
Absolutely. The rhythms of the sun and the moon, the seasons, the celestial cycles, these were the big organizers of the Jewish calendar. It wasn't arbitrary at all.
So there's a pattern.
Oh, definitely. If you look closely at the major Jewish holidays, you find this really systematic, almost poetic alignment with celestial events and farming cycles. It's like a cosmic dance.
Okay, give us some examples.
Right. Well, take Passover, a huge one. It starts on the first full moon of the year. Historically, before the first temple's destruction, that was in the month of Nisan. And this timing isn't random. It marks the time of the first harvests, spring awakening, the land coming back to life after winter. You can imagine the relief, the celebration.
The start of the agricultural year, basically.
Exactly. Then you have Shavuot, the Festival of Weeks. It lines up precisely with the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, and agriculturally.
That's the wheat harvest. The grains are ripe, ready. It's a celebration of bounty, peak abundance, gratitude for sustenance.
Okay. What about the fall?
Right, so moving into autumn, you've got Rosh Hashanah, the new year, and the current calendar, which, interestingly, has Babylonian origins. It's observed on the first new moon of the year. And its timing. It coincides perfectly with the fall equinox, and that marks the time of the last harvest before winter really kicks in. So a time for reflection, a turning point.
Makes sense. And Sukkot.
Sukkot, the festival of booths, follows close behind. The source describes it as marking the first full moon of the year within its specific seasonal context, lasting 7 days. It definitively wraps up that period of the last harvests, the final ingathering.
And Hanukkah fits this pattern, too.
It does. Hanukkah, the festival of lights, lines up with the winter solstice, shortest day of the year. So it's this powerful symbol, isn't it? Light winning out in the deepest darkness. Resonates with its history, of course, but the timing is key.
Okay, one more. And then there's Tu Bishvat. Now, technically, it's not a holiday like the others, more of a reference date. It's for figuring out the age of trees, for ritual offerings, things like that. It happens on the penultimate full moon before Passover, right when the first shoots start appearing on trees, those first hints of spring. A quiet promise.
So bringing it back to Purim, where does it fit in the celestial calendar?
This is what's so fascinating. Purim, the festival we're diving into, is uniquely positioned. According to the calendar system linked to the First Temple era, it lines up with both the vernal, or spring, equinox, and the last full moon of the year.
Both at the same time?
Yes. This double alignment isn't just a coincidence. It screams cosmic connection, right? It immediately sets Purim apart, even from the other astronomically aligned festivals, and hints at something deeper, something really ancient going on.
Okay, so most festivals are tied to the sun and moon agriculture, but you mentioned an exception.
Right. Given all these holidays synchronized with the sun or moon, Shabbat stands out. It's an anomaly. Unlike all the others we've just discussed, the texts explicitly state it's not tied to the moon or the sun in the same way, which immediately makes you ask why. Why does Shabbat break this pattern?
So what's the thinking there?
Well, the answer seems to lie in its really ancient pre-agricultural origins. Shabbat, and also Rosh Chodesh, the new moon festival, marking the start of each month they're understood to be older. They seem to predate settled agriculture. Think about the ancient Hebrews, or their ancestors' desert nomads in the Middle East. For them, the subtle shifts of seasons, so vital for farmers, were kind of less important. Their lives had a totally different rhythm.
Dictated by the desert, you mean?
Exactly. These nomads often worked at night, moving herds, tending flocks. Why? Because the desert sun during the day was brutal. Deadly, even. The moon, on the other hand, was their friend. It gave light, cooler temperatures. It made work and travel possible, even preferable.
And this links back to their beliefs about the cosmos. You mentioned the moon being seen as male.
Yes, that's a crucial piece. In that patriarchal society, the ancient Semites generally believed the moon was a masculine deity and the sun was feminine. This view shaped everything.
How so?
Well, this lunar deity was incredibly important. Look at ancient Egypt. The moon god there was called Yah. And you can trace that name right into the Hebrew Bible. In the Psalms, you see the name Yah.
Yeah.
And think about hallelujah. It literally means praise be to Yah.
Wow.
Yeah. And you see it embedded in lots of Hebrew names too. Theophoric names like Matthew, Atalia, Nehemiah, they all carry that divine element, Yah.
So back to the nomads and the moon cycle. How did that play out practically?
Okay, imagine watching the moon. It takes about 29 and a half days to go through its cycle, but its path isn't straight, it looks kind of wazy, and crucially, every 7 days, 3 times during that cycle, it looks like it slows down, almost stops moving across the sky. Then after the third stop, it vanishes completely for a bit during the new moon phase, the interlunium.
And this worried them.
Deeply distressed them. They believed their well-being, their survival, literally depended on their god, the moon, continuing his journey. They were terrified that this slowing down, or worse, the disappearance, might become permanent.
Yeah.
That their God would just stop. It was an existential fear.
So that anxiety, that's the root of observing the seventh day. It was a way to, encourage the moon god to keep moving.
Precisely. That fear explains the sanctification of the seventh day and the celebration of the moon god on that day. It was all about encouraging him to continue his journey, ensuring their own survival.
So Shabbat started as a purely lunar thing.
Exactly. Before they settled down and adopted agriculture, the ancient Hebrews, or Proto-Hebrews, used a purely lunar calendar. And under that system, Shabbat was a lunar holiday, celebrated on the 7th, 14th, 21st, and maybe the 28th or 29th day of the month, tied directly to those apparent pauses in the moon cycle.
But that changed.
It did. When they eventually adopted the lunisolar calendar, balancing both moon and sun cycles, Shabbat stopped being tied to a specific day of the month. Its timing became fixed on a 7-day cycle, regardless of the moon phase, but it kept that foundational idea of rest.
Interesting. And you mentioned Yom Kippur briefly.
Yeah, just quickly, Yom Kippur is sort of a special case. It falls 5 days before the full moon of Tishri. Originally, scholars think it might have been mainly about preparing for Sukkot, maybe 1 day for purification, then 3 or 4 days to build the booths needed for Sukkot. Its massive importance today, the central role it has in Judaism, seems to be more of a post-biblical development. It grew in significance over time.
Okay, so that sets the scene. Most holidays tied to celestial events, Shabbat as an ancient exception. Now let's dive into Purim itself. What makes it so utterly different?
Right. Let's zero in on the customs, the mandates, that really define Purim. First off, unlike most major holidays, the ones called Chag, which usually means stopping work on Purim, like Hanukkah or Tu Bishvat, work is permitted. That signals a different kind of observance right away.
Okay, not a day of complete rest. What else?
The really distinctive thing is its radical permissiveness. Purim is a day where lots of things normally forbidden are suddenly allowed, even encouraged, sometimes even commanded.
Like the cross-dressing.
Exactly. Women dressing as men, men as women. It's a clear, playful thumbing of the nose at normal societal roles and gender expectations. A deliberate blurring of lines, societal inversion.
But the most famous example has to be the drinking.
Oh, absolutely. Drunkenness. Normally a big no-no in Judaism. But on Purim, it's practically mandatory. The Babylonian Talmud, tractate Megillah 7b, is incredibly explicit. It quotes the sage Rava saying, "A person is obligated to become intoxicated with wine on Purim until he is so intoxicated that he does not know how to distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordecai."
Until you can't tell the difference between the villain and the hero. That's quite a state to aim for.
It really is. It's not just permission. It's an obligation to reach this state of, well, altered consciousness, a complete letting go of sober judgment.
So what did that look like in practice? Paint us a picture.
Well, imagine unbridled, joyous chaos, a total sensory overload. You've got elaborate parades, people wearing grotesque masks, drunken revelry everywhere, noise, especially from the graggers, the noisemakers, whenever Haman's name is read, general antics. People symbolically burn effigies of Haman. There are vibrant costume parades, huge feasts with special foods like Hamantaschen, just all sorts of boisterous celebration. It's a complete release, turning the everyday world upside down, totally unlike any other religious day.
And the spirit carries over into writing, too.
It does. Yeah. There's a whole genre of Purim-specific literature. Drunken songs, funny stories, skits, even burlesque plays that satirize traditional religious texts. A really great example is the Purim Tractate, or Masaket Purim. It was written in Rome, early 14th century, by a scholar named Kalonymus ben Kalonymus. It's this incredibly detailed parody of the Talmud itself. It mimics the structure, the commentary, the super commentary.
Seriously, a parody Talmud.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And the sages in it have names like Rabbi Bottle, Rabbi Flask, Rabbi Drunk. They engage in these absurd but cleverly constructed debates.
Like what?
Well, there's one discussion that uses fake biblical evidence to argue that the obligation to get drunk applies not just to men, women, and kids, but also to animals.
We got animals, too.
Animals, too. And another debate sets out to prove that all the great biblical heroes, from Adam to Moses, were actually secret drunkards. And the whole thing wraps up with a parody of the Passover Haggadah called the Drunkard's Night Haggadah. Just perfectly captures that spirit of holy foolishness, of sanctioned subversion.
That's amazing. So amidst all this fun and chaos, are there actual religious requirements, things you have to do?
Yes, despite all the revelry, there are two core religious obligations that anchor the whole thing. First, you have to listen to the reading of the Book of Esther, the Megillah. You listen twice, once at night, on the eve of Purim, and again during the daytime. That's crucial for retelling the story. Second, you're obligated to have a big celebratory meal, a banquet, a Suda. And it has to start before nightfall on Purim Day.
Okay, so Megillah reading and a big feast, those are the anchors.
Exactly. They ensure the historical story and the communal aspect are kept central, even within all the joyous mayhem.
Right, so Purim's unique features the revelry, the role reversal, the drinking, and especially that specific timing at the spring equinox and full moon. It's no wonder scholars have been fascinated by this for ages. It's sparked a lot of debate about where it actually came from.
Absolutely. The academic quest to understand Purim's roots often looks outside traditional Jewish sources, exploring possible influences from other ancient cultures. And this is where things get really interesting, challenging some long-held ideas.
Okay, so where do these theories take us?
Well, one of the earliest and most debated connections is with a Persian festival called Sacaea, or Sacaea in Greek. We know about it largely thanks to the Greek geographer Strabo, who wrote about it back around the turn of the millennium. Between 64 BC and 24 AD, he describes it in his big work, Geography.
And the connection is?
The timing, first and foremost. Strabo says Sacaea celebrated the Persian New Year, and crucially, it happened right around the spring equinox.
The same time as Purim, that's a direct hit.
It is, and the similarities don't stop there. Sacaea apparently started during the reign of Cyrus the Great, famous for letting the Jews rebuild the temple in Jerusalem.
Right, yeah.
He was known for religious tolerance, supporting temples for various gods. Sacaea itself was polytheistic. A key goddess celebrated was Anahita, or Anaitis, the goddess of love and beauty. She's basically the Persian equivalent of Babylon's Ishtar or Greece's Aphrodite, which points to lots of cultural mixing.
Okay, interesting. But what about the way it was celebrated?
This is the key part.
Yeah.
Strabo describes Sacaea as being marked by exactly the things we see in Purim: widespread drunkenness, often quite licentious behavior, and a very clear, deliberate reversal of normal customs and social roles.
Like what kind of reversal?
Literally, slaves would rule their masters for the duration of the festival. Adults would act like children. The rich would dress and act like the poor. Total topsy-turvy time. Controlled chaos.
Wow. The parallels in the revelry, the drunkenness, the social inversion, they're really strong. That makes Sacaea a very compelling possible influence, or maybe evidence of a shared ancient custom for that time of year.
It's definitely a strong contender for an early connection, suggesting either influence or a common root. Now, fast forward about 1,000 years, we get another fascinating angle from the Muslim polymath al-Biruni, writing around the year 1000 AD. In his work, The Remaining Signs of Past Centuries, He gives this really interesting, almost counterintuitive explanation for Purim's date.
Okay, what did he say?
Al-Biruni shares a tradition that says Haman, when he was plotting to destroy the Jews, asked his diviners for the best possible date. And they told him the 14th and 15th of Adar were actually the most disastrous days possible for the Jews because their great teacher Moses had died in Adar.
Wait, so Haman chose the worst days for the Jews, according to this tradition.
That's the idea. So if you follow Al-Biruni's logic, it flips our understanding completely. It suggests Purim might have originally been seen as an inauspicious day, a day of bad luck or potential disaster.
Which would mean?
Which could mean that all the characteristic rites, the wild merriment, the noise, the feasting, the drinking, might have originally served to ward off that bad luck, to actively transform a potentially terrible day into a good one through sheer force of celebration, turning fate on its head.
That is a fascinating twist. Okay, so we have potential Persian connections, this idea of warding off bad luck. When did scholars really start digging into this systematically?
The big explosion of academic interest really happened in the late 19th century. This was the peak of biblical criticism and the rise of what was called Wissenschaft des Judentums, the science of Judaism. Scholars were applying critical historical methods to understand Jewish traditions, looking for origins and influences.
And Purim was a prime candidate for this kind of analysis.
Absolutely. Its uniqueness made it irresistible. So in 1886, Heinrich Greitz, a hugely influential Jewish historian, proposed a Greek origin. He linked Purim to a festival called Pithoigía.
Pithoigía? What was that?
It was apparently a Greek festival celebrating the opening of the new wine jars, the pithoi, that had been made the previous fall. And according to Greitz, it was marked by, guess what? Drunkenness, revelry, joy. And significantly, it also happened around the full moon and the spring equinox.
Okay, timing, drunkenness, revelry. Sounds familiar. So was this theory widely accepted?
Not really. It had a couple of big weaknesses. First, Greitz tried to make an etymological link between per, the lots cast by Haman, and pithoi, the Greek word for barrel. That connection was pretty weak, linguistically. And maybe more importantly, apart from the timing and the partying, his theory didn't really connect Pithoigía to the actual story of the Book of Esther. The themes didn't match up beyond the surface level.
So a bit of a stretch. What came next?
Well, just a year later, in 1887, an Orientalist named Paul de Lagarde tried a different etymological route. He focused purely on the word per. He suggested it came from frafirsti, an old Persian word sometimes linked to immortality, and claimed Purim derived from the Zoroastrian festival of Farvardinigan.
And how did that theory land?
Basically, it had nothing going for it, seriously. First, the Book of Esther itself, chapter 9, verse 24, tells you exactly what per means in context. It means lot or destiny. It has zero connection to Friday.
Okay, strike one.
And strike two. Farvardinigan is a 10-day festival for the dead, held in early November. Think Day of the Dead or Halloween. Apart from having banquets, it shares absolutely nothing with Purim's theme or its spring equinox date, so completely off base, widely dismissed.
Right, so Greitz's Greek idea didn't quite work. Lagarde's Persian one was a non-starter.
But then came Heinrich Zimmern in 1891. Zimmern was a top-notch Assyriologist, an expert in ancient Mesopotamian cultures. He set out to refute Lagarde's flimsy theory. And instead of looking for the origin of Per in Persia, like Lagarde, or Greece, like Greitz, he looked to Mesopotamia. And what he found was, well, pretty groundbreaking. It changed the whole conversation.
Okay, this sounds promising. What did Zimmern find?
He discovered that in Akkadian, the ancient language of Assyria and Babylonia, also called Lishanam Akkaditum, the word Per means assembly of the gods.
Assembly of the gods. Not lot or destiny.
Not directly. But stick with me. This Per, this assembly of the gods, was a major event. It took place at the New Year festival, which crucially coincided with the spring equinox. Again, that timing connection. And what happened at this divine assembly? The gods gathered to decide the fate of humanity for the coming year. They decided who would live, who would die. They literally determined the destiny, the lot of every single person.
Ah, okay, so the assembly determined the lots or fates.
Exactly. Zimmern argued that through metonymy, where you use a related concept to stand for the thing itself, like saying the White House decided. When you mean the word per, meaning the assembly, came to mean fate or destiny in the Book of Esther, because that's what the assembly decided.
That makes sense linguistically, but what's the biggest takeaway from this discovery?
The most significant detail Zimmern uncovered relates to who was in charge at this divine assembly. The head god, the king of the gods presiding over the Per, was Marduk, the chief deity of Babylon.
Marduk, wait. A Mordecai?
Precisely. This immediately highlights the incredibly striking similarity between the Babylonian god Marduk and the Purim hero Mordecai, and also between the major Babylonian goddess Ishtar and Queen Esther.
Ishtar, Esther, Marduk, Mordecai. Things are so close, that's uncanny.
It really is. The phonetic resemblance, combined with the thematic links to fate and a divine assembly at the spring equinox, makes this Mesopotamian connection incredibly compelling.
And is there any older evidence supporting this link?
Fascinatingly, yes. If you look at the second book of Maccabees, chapter 15, verse 36, this is a text from the 2nd century BCE, way before modern scholarship. It explicitly refers to the festival celebrated on the 14th and 15th of Adar as Mordecai Day.
Mordecai Day, not Purim.
Mordecai Day. That ancient name strongly suggests that the connection between the festival and the figure of Mordecai, and by extension perhaps Marduk, was recognized or prominent very early on, lending ancient weight to Zimmerman's Mesopotamian hypothesis.
Okay, this web of ancient connections, Babylonian gods, Persian festivals, Greek customs, it all leads us back to the Book of Esther itself. What role does the actual biblical text play in all this? Is it history? Is it something else?
Right. Well, the general consensus among scholars today is that the festival of Purim, in some form, likely existed before the Book of Esther was written. The book then seems to serve a crucial function. It takes this existing popular festival and institutionalizes it as a specifically Jewish celebration. It gives it a Jewish national narrative, a historical anchor within Jewish tradition. It provides the official story, if you will.
And is that official story considered historically accurate?
Well, while many believers understandably take the story of Esther, Ahasuerus, Haman, and Mordecai as historical fact, most scholars tend to agree that the specific plot is probably fictional. But, like most good fiction, it's likely rooted in some underlying reality. It draws on the general historical setting of the Persian Empire, known cultural dynamics, political tensions of that era. It feels real because it borrows from reality.
Are there specific theories about that underlying reality?
Yes. For instance, in 1975, Robert Lippmann proposed placing the story in the reign of Xerxes, who ruled Persia from 486 to 465 BC. Xerxes is very widely identified as the king Ahasuerus mentioned in the Book of Esther.
Okay, Xerxes. What was significant about his reign in this context?
Lippmann highlights Xerxes' religious policy. Unlike Cyrus the Great before him, who was famous for tolerance, Xerxes seems to have pursued religious intolerance. His goal was apparently to impose Zoroastrianism across his empire. He's known to have plundered and destroyed temples of other gods, including, significantly, the main temple of Marduk the Esagila and the idol of Bel-Marduk in Babylon. And importantly for the Esther story, which is set in Susa, there was a major temple to the goddess Ishtar in Susa, and presumably many worshippers of Marduk lived there too.
So Lippmann's argument is?
His thesis suggests that the people being persecuted in Susa during Xerxes' reign, the ones reflected in the original kernel of the Esther story, might have primarily been the worshippers of Marduk and Ishtar, not necessarily the Jews per se.
Wow. That completely reframes the conflict. It becomes a story about broader religious persecution under Xerxes, which was then later adapted or reinterpreted as a specifically Jewish story.
That's the implication of his thesis, yes. It suggests a layering of meaning.
Are there other theories along these lines?
There are. Julius Louis, writing back in 1939, offered another really interesting take, focusing on a different Persian king, Artaxerxes II, who was Xerxes' grandson, and reigned from 405 to 358 BC.
Okay, Artaxerxes II, what was his angle?
Louis pointed out that Artaxerxes II actually reversed his grandfather Xerxes' policy. Xerxes tried to impose the monotheistic cult of Ahura Mazda. Artaxerxes II instead brought back and actively promoted the cults of the goddess Anahita, remember her from the Sacaea section, and the god Mithra. So Louis suggested that maybe the conflict underlying the Esther story originated in Susa during this period, with the followers of these newly favored cults trying to eliminate the established worshippers of Marduk.
Another internal Persian religious conflict, basically, but centered on Marduk worshippers again.
Potentially, yes. And Louis supported this by pointing to some intriguing clues within the Book of Esther itself.
Such as?
Well, first, there's that really conspicuous, absolutely unique absence of God's name, YHWH, anywhere in the book. Very strange for a biblical text.
Right, we mentioned that. What else?
Louis also notes the phrase Esther the Queen, in Hebrew, Esther Hamalka. He suggests this could be heard almost as a hidden praise of the goddess Ishtar, whose name sounds very similar, and whose title in Akkadian was Sharat, meaning queen, Ishtar Sharat.
Esther Hamalka. Ishtar Sharat. Okay, that's clever.
And one more. The text refers to Mordecai's people as am Mordecai,
Right.
literally people of Mordecai. Louis points out that with a very slight vowel change, this could be read as am Marduki, the Mardukian people, the worshippers of Marduk.
So putting those clues together.
Louis supposed that perhaps in the original story, before it was adapted into the Hebrew Bible, the group facing persecution wasn't the Jews, but rather the race of Esther and Mordecai, that is, the worshippers of Ishtar and Marduk.
Again, suggesting the story was adopted and Judaized later on.
Exactly. It raises fascinating questions about how narratives travel, how they get layered with new meanings through cultural assimilation, retaining echoes of their older forms even as they become something new.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground: celestial alignments, ancient nomadic practices, Persian festivals, Greek theories, Mesopotamian gods, historical interpretations of the Book of Esther. Let's try to synthesize this. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive?
Right, let's pull the threads together. First, we've clearly seen how critical the positions of the sun and moon were for setting the dates of Jewish festivals. That cosmic clock was fundamental. And within that system, Purim definitely stands out. It's this unique lunisolar festival tied directly to the spring equinox and the full moon occurring together.
And we saw incredible similarities across cultures, right? Purim doesn't just share its date, but also its core vibe: the revelry, the big feasts, the drinking with other ancient spring equinox festivals,
Wow.
like the Greek Pithoigía, the Persian Sacaea.
Exactly. And even modern festivals like Nowruz, the Iranian New Year, and Holi in India share some of those characteristics of spring renewal, release, and celebration. The echoes are widespread and persistent.
Suggesting a common origin or impulse.
Well, it leads to a pretty strong assumption, or hypothesis at least, that Purim and maybe even Hanukkah, with its winter solstice connection, likely existed in some popular folkloric form before they were formally adopted into Judaism. These were probably festivals deeply linked to these major astronomical turning points, equinoxes, solstices celebrating the cycles of nature.
And they picked up myths along the way.
Yes, these popular festivals became associated with myths and traditions that spread widely throughout the ancient Middle East. Jewish culture, being right at the crossroads, was inevitably influenced. We saw specifically how the Babylonian mythic structure, the opposition between gods like Marduk and Ishtar versus other deities like the Elamite gods Uman, echoed in Haman, and Mashti, echoed in Vashti, seems to have provided a narrative template that resonates within the Purim story.
And there's that powerful symbolism of the spring equinox itself, days becoming longer than nights.
Precisely. It's a perfect natural symbol for the triumph of light over darkness, order over chaos, life over death.
Which you said connects back to Babylonian myth.
Yes, that theme is famously dramatized in the Enuma Eliah, the Babylonian creation epic. Marduk defeats Tiamat, the goddess of chaos and darkness, establishing order. And remember, biblical scholars see echoes of the Enuma Eli themes like creation, the flood in the Book of Genesis itself. This shows just how influential these Mesopotamian narratives were across the region. They were foundational stories.
And you also mentioned liminality. How does that fit in?
Ah, yes, the anthropological concept. Liminality refers to transitional periods, times when normal rules are suspended, when you're between states. The spring equinox is a natural liminal moment, a shift in the balance of natural forces. And this seems to provide a perfect pretext, almost an excuse, for a universal human need to temporarily break conventions, to let off steam. We see this need clearly expressed in Purim's permitted chaos, the role reversals, the drunkenness. It's very similar to what happens during carnival celebrations in other cultures, a necessary societal pressure valve.
So the Book of Esther itself becomes this melting pot.
Exactly. You can see it as this incredible cultural tapestry. The language is Hebrew, the literary style has Hellenistic influences, but the core themes are Iranian and Mesopotamian. It perfectly reflects the diverse world it came from.
So what was the book's main job then? And how does that explain that really weird absence of God's name?
Its main purpose seems to have been to take this popular, maybe even pagan-rooted folk festival and weave it into the fabric of Judaism. It did this by transforming the likely pagan gods, Ishtar, Marduk, maybe others, into Jewish or Persian human characters like Esther, Mordecai, Vashti, and Haman, making the story acceptable within a monotheistic tradition.
But the transformation wasn't quite complete.
Apparently not entirely. It seems the editors or compilers of the Book of Esther, even though they felt comfortable adding God's name into other potentially problematic books like Ecclesiastes or Song of Songs, drew the line here. They just couldn't bring themselves to explicitly put the name of YHWH, the unique God of Israel, directly into a story so clearly populated by figures echoing Ishtar, Marduk, Uman, and Mashti. That absence remains this huge, perplexing anomaly. It strongly suggests they knew about the story's non-Israelite roots and felt uneasy about fully integrating God into that specific narrative framework.
So it's not necessarily a copy of another festival, but deeply influenced.
Exactly. We can't say Purim is just a Hebrew version of Sacaea or Pithoigía. It might well have started as an indigenous Canaanite or Israelite spring festival. But the culture in Eretz Israel, especially in the Hellenistic period, 3rd, 2nd centuries BC, was profoundly influenced by its powerful neighbors, Greek, Persian, and especially Babylonian culture. Think about what was adopted: the Babylonian calendar and month names, Nisan, Adar, etc., the square Aramaic Assyrian script used for Hebrew today, elements of creation and flood myths found in Genesis. And it seems other myths, maybe not influential enough for the Torah, still significantly shaped the themes and practices of folk festivals, like the one that became Purim. It's cultural blending.
It's easy for us to forget, isn't it, living with smartphones and clocks?
Completely. For us, modern urban people, it's hard to grasp how incredibly important just watching the sky was for ancient peoples. The profound significance they attached to a moment like the spring equinox, coinciding exactly with the full moon. That wasn't just a neat astronomical event. It was deeply meaningful, potentially terrifying, cosmically significant, woven into their whole understanding of the world.
And despite all these complex, perhaps non-Jewish origins, Purim became deeply embedded in Judaism. Even the rabbis acknowledged its lasting power.
Astonishingly, yes.
Yeah.
They seem to recognize its profound resonance. In the Palestinian Talmud, Megillah 1.5, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish makes this incredible statement. He says that in the future Messianic age, the only texts that will remain eternally valid are the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, and the Book of Esther.
Wow. Esther, alongside the Torah itself.
Right. And there's more. In a later commentary, Midrash Mishlei, on Proverbs 9.1, there's a discussion where Rabbi Auzu says that in the future, all the holidays will eventually be annulled, except for the days of Purim. Then Rabbi Elazar adds that Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, will also never be annulled.
So Purim and Yom Kippur, the wildest party and the most solemn day. Those are the two survivors.
According to this tradition, yes. It remarkably positions Purim, this festival of chaos and deliverance, alongside the holiest day of the year, as one of only 2 holidays believed to endure into the ultimate future. It speaks volumes about its perceived, deep, maybe even archetypal significance for the human experience within Jewish thought.
What a journey. We've gone from desert nomads watching the moon, through ancient empires and their gods, intricate academic debates, right up to rabbinic views of the end times. All to understand a holiday celebrated with costumes and noisemakers.
It really shows how these deep human experiences, the simple desire for joy, the need for release, that basic search for meaning in the world around us, in the cosmos, how they get woven into the fabric of our oldest traditions. They adapt, they change, but they endure.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If a festival like Purim, born from this incredibly complex mix of ancient cultures, stargazing, and maybe even pagan roots, if that festival is seen as one of only 2 destined to last forever, what deeper, timeless truth might it hold for us today? Beyond the costumes, the drinking, the whole party aspect, what's the enduring message? Something to ponder, maybe, as you reflect on this amazing interplay of history, culture, and the enduring and sometimes quite surprising human spirit.